Razorback, back of Razor. Who remembers when Razorbacks had the las cannon plasma gun weapon combination? Who remembers when they had a dude in the turret? Who remembers vibrant colour schemes and ballsy rules? If you do remember, you're in for a nostalgic treat. And if you don't, well then, jump aboard the fun wagon anyway. You're more than welcome to this retro Warhammer channel. So how about we put the worries of life behind us for about 30 minutes while we paint and discuss the rules and model history for the Razorback. Are you tired of chasing the meta and latest releases with a limited game life? You've come to the right place. Miniscape is a channel all about discovering the joy of older editions of Warhammer 40k. My favourite edition is 2nd edition, but occasionally I give 1st, 3rd and 4th some attention. So if that sounds like something you'd like, please press all the necessary YouTube buttons, consider checking out my Instagram, and find me on Ko-fi to show your appreciation. I collected Space Marines in the 90s. I missed out on the opportunity to own an original Razorback at the time, though I did buy the refreshed kit with twin heavy bolters and las cannons when that was released. I loved the little dude in the turret. I don't know, it just seemed cute, if you can attribute that to such a vehicle of war. I always admired the over-the-top Ultramarines primary coloured scheme on the Razorback, and with it being a while since my Ultramarines got any love, I felt it was the right time to paint up one of these. A kind chap called Andy fixed me up with a few retro vehicles, including the parts to make the Razorback. So let's start the building process. I begin with the tracks, the back of which was damaged beyond repair, but I fixed this with plasticard, and no one will be any the wiser, except the handful of people who watch this video, I suppose. One of the exhausts was missing a pipe, but I fashioned a new one from steel wire, which was roughly the same girth as the original. Here I am attaching the headlights. I know some heathens place them on the very end of the track, but that seems like madness to me. This shows the exhausts glued on the tracks, and the tracks glued on the hull. As you can see, I used some sprue goo to fill in a gap. It's just what I had to hand, you see. The Razorback diverged from the Rhino, first with this metal top plate where the turret would sit. You can see I have attached 2 panels to the front, and done a little repair work with green stuff. On goes the turret base, the las plas weapon, the armoured shield, and the driver, who is by far my favourite part of the Razorback. It added a whole lot more character to the piece, in my opinion, which the later Razorback lacked. Of course, this was all just a dry fit. Because of the detail, I painted the whole thing in sub-assemblies. The metal parts on my priming stick were sprayed white, and the hull was sprayed blue, using a couple of coats of Colourforge Republic blue. Now, I shall separate my tale of painting this model into 3 sections. Number 1, the hull. Number 2, the turret. And 3, the gunner. First, the hull. The Republic blue from the spray can was not to be the final blue colour. Some Vallejo flat blue mixed in with Duncan's Witching Hour blue was applied using my dry brush to build up a lighter coat all over the model. The aim was to catch the edges and raised areas mostly. Unfortunately, the dry brushing was too much for this exhaust. I decided not to reattach it until the end, because it would probably come off multiple times, due to the vigour with which I perform. Now, onto some edge highlighting. I try a different recipe this time. Flat blue, mixed with Fenrisian grey. The Warhammer shop dude did not advise mixing Warhammer paints with other manufacturers, but this was fine. I don't know what he was tripping. Anyway, I edged each of the armour panels with the edge of my brush, using a small volume of my mixture. This picked out all of the sharp edges. In some cases, I needed to use the tip of my brush. For example, near the front of all the tracks here. And that's what the vehicle looks like after the first round of highlighting. Another flat blue Fenrisian grey mixture was created, with only a dash of flat blue this time, and again, the universe didn't implode. I think I mixed a dash of white in there as well, just to make it a touch lighter. This was my second blue highlight, to make the sharpest edges and corners pop. I also ensure each of the rivets gets this as well. I take my time here to select the most pertinent areas for the model. I feel like the extra emphasis can really sell a model. Though this is not a tutorial, and I am no competition-winning painter, I still want to make a good job of this. The side doors on the Razorback were to be painted red. To get the necessary brightness, I base coated these doors with white before applying the red. A few thin coats of the white is necessary for adequate coverage. Then I move on to Evil Sunz Scarlet, again using a couple of thin layers. The auto launchers are painted in the same fashion. And that's how they look in all their glorious vibrance with those steps done. Black Legion Contrast is painted on these grills, at the front and at the back of the tracks, and it's also used to base coat the tracks themselves. P3 Cold Steel, which is not entirely unlike the original bolt gun metal, is painted on the tracks, but leaving some of the black showing in the recesses, as you can see me doing here. On the wheel parts, just the rim and the rivets are painted. The rest remains black. Obviously, I choose the correct size of my brush for the job at hand. Now in this clip, you can see that I had time to kill, as I attempted to paint each of the lines on these grills individually. In the end, I lost patience, and just dry brushed them with cold steel, followed by a black wash, or wash of black. In this case, it was Army Painter Dark Tone. I'm not even going to say it. The exhausts are also painted with cold steel, and then washed with dark tone. Downward strokes give a result I am pleased with. Nothing else fancy here. They didn't look too fancy in the photos that I'm following after all. The red areas, namely the doors on the side and the auto launchers, are highlighted first with a mixture of Evil Sunz Scarlet with a little dark sand, followed by a sharper highlight of AK Basic Skin Tone. I will show more examples of this when I paint the turret. And that is the paint job on the whole done. It's time to cover the background of the Razorback. The Razorback was released in 1994, during the reign of 2nd edition 40k. The White Dwarf article covering the release was issue 174 from June of that year. Other familiar releases from that month were Eldar Warwalkers, the Eldar Dreadnought, anti-grav weapons platforms, and a blister of jump packs. Of the Razorback, the issue of White Dwarf said this: "A devastating new support weapon for the Space Marines is released this month. In this issue, you will find full rules and a complete card datafax for using the Razorback, a new and deadly variant of the Rhino. You can also look for an heavy metal page detailing the new Razorback transfers and special insignia. To get your hands on such a beauty would cost you £14.99. This price puts it at the same as a Tyranid Carnifex, slightly more than an Eldar Warwalker, £5 less than an Orc Dreadnought, or the expansion Dark Millennium. And if you wanted a Codex, well, that would only cost you £9.99. The Razorback got its own article in this edition of White Dwarf, written by tank aficionado Ian Pickstock. The introduction describes how the Razorback is designed to smash through enemy armour and then deploy a combat squad of Space Marines to mop up any survivors and secure the area. I like this paragraph talking about the standard template constructor variants of the standard Rhino APC chassis, which forms the basis of many of the Space Marine vehicles. They mention a variant that provides artillery support, probably the Whirlwind, and one which mounts a close-range demolition cannon. Surely the Vindicator, even though this had no model at the time, though instructions from an earlier White Dwarf showed you how to make one. The STC for the Razorback was recovered about 5 millennia ago by Chief Artisan Tilvius, who named it the Tilvius Raider, but that didn't catch on. a fact which he no doubt blames on his bitter rival Arkan Razorback. Anyway, the Razorback is used in a fire support role, escorting rhinos or units of Space Marines. Its las cannon is for tank busting, and its twin plasma guns for dealing with light vehicles and enemy infantry. Being able to carry 5 Space Marines, the Razorback is an ideal unit for a mobile command centre. It is interesting that the special rules for the Razorback are included here, and not in any of the Space Marine codices. This seems like an oversight to me, since the Whirlwind and Dreadnoughts got their own section in Codex Ultramarines, while the Razorback only gets a colourful page and an army list entry. There isn't even a datafax in here. I guess you were assumed to own Dark Millennium or White Dwarf 174, although I suppose some vehicle instructions came with a datafax at the back of that booklet. Anyway, the White Dwarf rules cover a few interesting concepts. The first pertains to shooting at the turret. As the owner, it's important that when using the Razorback, you leave the turret pointing at the last target it fired at, since the armour values are quite different at the front compared with the sides and rear. If the firer shoots and hits the turret from the front, then he must roll to penetrate the turret's frontal armour, even if the firer is standing to the rear or the side of the actual Razorback's hull. If the firer hits the turret from the side or rear, then there is a chance that the shot will hit the exposed Space Marine gunner. Roll a d6. On a roll of a 1, 2 or 3, then the turret has been hit. Roll to penetrate the turret's side-rear armour as normal. On a roll of a 4, 5 or 6, the Space Marine gunner has been hit. Roll to see if the gunner is killed using the normal shooting rules. If a weapon with a blast marker is fired at the Razorback, and the template lies over the gunner, then he will only ever be affected on a roll of a 4, 5 or 6, due to the protection of the armoured shield. Now, I have heard people get into a right funk about this so-called peculiar combination of las cannon and plasma guns. However, one must bear in mind that when firing this linked las-plas, as it was affectionately known, hits could be allocated to different targets, so the las cannon shot wouldn't necessarily be wasted on a basic infantryman, or the plasma guns wasted on an armoured vehicle. You can of course choose to only fire certain parts of the las-plas, or fire all 3. If firing all parts, then hits from the plasma gun can be allocated to other visible models within 4 inches of the initial target hit by the las cannon, as long as they are within range. There is an argument for firing just one of the plasma guns each turn. This gives the other one the opportunity to recharge, while still having one available for shooting. Plasma jams, which sound delicious on toast, can of course be cleared while the plasma gun is recharging. It doesn't have to recharge in one turn and then unjam in the following turn, because they can do 2 things at once, and are nifty like that. There is a particular rule for close combat as well. If any models attack the Razorback in close combat, then the Space Marine gunner can either stay and fight, or hide inside the Razorback, closing the door behind him. If the gunner ducks inside, then the attacker cannot choose to attack him because he is not there. However, if the attacker hits and penetrates the turret, the gunner can still be killed if the attacker rolls a 3 on the turret damage table, and if the Razorback is an Overwatch, it may shoot the attackers as they charge in, and then the gunner can duck inside and close the hatch. Including a Razorback in your Space Marine army sets you back 150 points, or 155 if you want auto launchers. As with the support choices, you have to pay a minimum of 33 points to include a Tech Marine in order to include any vehicles, except bikes. This has been called the Tech Marine tax. The vehicle has a single driver and a single gunner. Like all vehicles, it can cause damage to others and itself when it rams. Its weapons are a las cannon and 2 plasma guns linked in a turret mount, and it can transport 5 Space Marines or a single support weapon. If you shoot at the Razorback and hit, you could hit a track of the hull or the turret. The higher you roll on the damage table, the more spectacular the damage. Rolling a 6 normally leads to explosions. Even a 6 on the track results in a devastating flip. Any roll on the hull damage table leads to an explosion of some kind. Rolling a 6 for the turret leads to it being launched 2d6 inches in a random direction, dealing the equivalent of d6 las cannon hits to whatever it strikes. Gosh, is it shooting on the way down? And like many transport vehicles of this edition, it is a death trap for passengers, since there are several outcomes on this datafax which leads to their demise. Catalogue pages in this issue do not show the Razorback, but the catalogue page in the Codex does, along with all the different components and how to assemble them. I would be negligent if I didn't mention the Razorback in other codices. We don't get to see a Blood Angels Razorback here, but there is a Dark Angels one. The Blood Angels 3rd edition codex, shows a converted Razorback on the back cover, created by Jake Flemmix. I love the ablative armor and hazard stripes on this one. The 2nd edition codex entry for the Razorback in Codex Ultramarines is exactly the same as in Codex Angels of Death. The Razorback does not appear at all in the Space Wolf Codex though, probably because it was released before the Razorback kit. And cue big puppy dog tears. Oh, it's okay, Space Wolf player. If you were my opponent, I would let you take one. Not that you need to rely on my beneficence, because in White Dwarf 187, in the famous tank-heavy heretic battle report, the Space Wolves did indeed have 2 Razorbacks, including this fancy conversion. In 3rd edition, the Razorback was a dedicated transport choice for Space Marine chapters. This means you could take one for every troop's choice at the very least. No doubt you could take more with a bit of list tweaking, since they were an option available not only to tactical squads, but also Devastator squads, veteran squads, and command squads, so that is potentially a lot of Razorbacks. Since I can't be bothered to reckon it, your homework is to figure out how many Razorbacks you could max out in a 1500 point Space Marine list. Answers in the comments, please. A Razorback sets you back 70 points in 3rd edition. It has armor 11 on the front and sides, and only 10 on the back, which means, like many vehicles in this edition, you could bolter it to death if you placed your troops carefully. It has more weapon options though this time. The standard is now twin-linked heavy bolters. For an extra 20 points this can be upgraded to a twin-linked las cannon, for 5 points a multi-melter, for 15 points your favourite, the las plas. The multi-melter seems like an absolute bargain in my opinion, and this time the Razorback can carry 6 Space Marines rather than 5. Both the las plas and the heavy bolter variants can be seen in the pages of this codex. The latter was an update to the first Razorback kit, but now has heavy bolters. I suspect this picture is the conversion rather than the official kit, since that was released later. White Dwarf 230 gives an example of a conversion done with Landspeeder heavy bolters. Remember the days when Games Workshop released rules for a model without an official kit? White Dwarf 235 announces the coming new Razorback kit at the back of the issue, with one painted as Crimson Fists, appearing in a battle report earlier in the magazine. White Dwarf 236 has an article on the new kit, showing us the new options, both of which were included in the box, and assuring those old school players that the las plas could still be ordered via mail order. They say the only problem now is just how to shoehorn as many Razorbacks as you can into your Space Marine army. Seems like they had the same thought as I. The back of the issue showed us a special deal. The Razor, 8 Space Marines, and your chapter shoulder pads thrown in, all for £36. The Razorback itself was £20. In 4th edition, the Space Marines Codex tells us that the Razorback is again 70 points base, but only the heavy bolter and las cannon options are available for the turret, though the las plas and other options make a comeback in the 5th edition Codex. And can anyone tell me why the transports were so much cheaper in 5th edition? Of course, the last 2 editions assumed you would now be using the inferior, newer all-plastic Razorback kit, with no dude in the turret, and just a remote control pair of weapons at the back. I shall say no more on this, I just prefer the older one. Let's paint the turret now, shall we? A reminder, I am starting with a white base coat. To get maximum vibrancy with the red, Evil Sun Scarlet is applied in a couple of thin coats over the white undercoat of the base. I won't be showing the painting of every piece, just an example of how each colour was used, but rest assured, I repeated the same process for each colour throughout. On the armoured shield, I avoid the Imperialis symbol, because the wings will be white and the skull will be bony. I make up a glaze using Fenrisian Grey and AK Glaze Medium, and some water. If you've watched my Eldar videos, you'll be familiar with this process when painting the white armour. Suffice it to say, it seeps into the recesses well, leaving the white and the raised areas still vibrant. Later I base coated the skulls with tan earth, gave it a coat of contrast skeleton horde, followed by using dark sand to pick out some of the details such as the teeth and around the eyes. On the main weapon, much of this was painted Evil Sun Scarlet, like the base, but some of it I left white, namely the plasma guns, so I could paint them yellow, namely Fiendish Yellow. While the yellow was drying, I paint Black Legion on the shaft of the las cannon, and on the end of the barrel, and a few other places, until it looks like this. And while the pot of Black Legion is still open, I return to the base and start painting a few details there, mainly the pipes and tubes and whatnot. Caliban green is then used to paint the ribbed tubes and some of the pipe work, and when that was dry, Warpstone Glow was used to highlight the raised parts of these areas. I mix up an orange glaze and apply it all over the yellow plasma guns. And then I return to the base and begin to highlight the red areas. This was achieved by mixing the Evil Sun Scarlet with a little dark sand, and picking out all of the sharp edges. The sharpest edges are then picked out with AK Basic Skin Tone. This mirrors the highlighting step on the blue earlier, having an intermediate highlight colour to highlight everything and a very light highlight colour for the sharpest points. This painting technique is by no means new, so I'm just copying it because it's a style that I like. AK Frog Green is used as the last highlight on the pipework and on the base. Had I not kept this separate, then this would have been almost impossible to paint, and that's how it looks after that step. Cold Steel is used again, this time to paint a few components around the pipes, until it looks like this. I return to the weapon and paint some more black on the inside details, near where the Space Marine will connect his PS2 controller. And at this stage, I feel like I've painted enough details on the base to be able to stick the weapon to it, which will make holding the piece a lot simpler. You can also see at this stage that I painted a detail on one side of the base black with blue highlights, and another section white, which will have a decal on it later. A layer of Fiendish Yellow is applied to the plasma guns again to bring that colour back after the orange shading step. On the very top of the plasma guns, I use Flashgit's Yellow. Here are some more details I picked out with Cold Steel. The inside sections, which are black, are given an edge highlight of Oxford Blue. This is also painted on the ribs of the las cannon and then applied to the top of the las cannon itself. Following that, these sections are highlighted with sharp lines of Fenrisian Grey. Some Wolf Grey is applied to the coils of the plasma guns, which are highlighted with Fenrisian Grey mixed with white, because believe it or not, in the history of Warhammer, painting plasma coils did not always involve them glowing brighter than the sun. I'm not sure when that trend started, and although it doesn't involve painted models, I do remember seeing it as early as the first Dawn of War video game. Let's paint the gunner. The gunner has his own temporary base to aid painting. A 3-to-1 mixture of Vallejo Flat Blue and Duncan's Witching Owl Blue is applied all over his armour. With the base coat done, I wanted to add some shading. I decided to mix my own shade with 2-to-1 Macragge Blue and AK Glaze Medium, mixed with a little water. I applied this liberally all over our lad, and the mixture sunk into the recesses nicely. When that's dry, I repeat the process of highlighting in the same way as I highlighted the hull of the Razorback. First with a mixture of flat blue and Fenrisian Grey, and then with a sharper highlight with a lighter shade of the aforementioned. I wanted the trims on his pauldrons to be yellow, so I base coated these trims with white first, which is a better base coat for yellow than blue. I also base coat the wings on his chest with white, since those will be yellow as well. Black Legion contrast paint is used to paint this PS2 controller that he is holding here, which he uses to control the las plas gun on the turret. Then, while this is handy, I also paint the pipes with this colour, and that's how he looks after these steps. Fiendish Yellow is painted on the trims and the chest symbol, which is then shaded with a brown wash. Just like with the black sections of the gun inside, which will match his controller, I paint around the edges with Oxford Blue, and this was followed by Fenrisian Grey, which was also used to highlight the ribs on the pipes around his back. I hope that these are pipes he can disconnect quickly in a pinch, such as if the Razorback is knocked out and he needs to escape. It would be sad if his position was locked in. In 2nd edition, the crew of a vehicle could escape in certain circumstances when the vehicle was destroyed, and then they could run around the tabletop as a little squad. A base coat of Mephiston Red is applied to the gem, as well as some nearby cabling and the eye lenses. And he's looking like this. Evil Sun Scarlet is painted along the bottom of the gem, and a dilute layer of black is applied to the top, along with a dot of white in the top quadrant. The eye lenses are given a similar treatment. I have mostly assembled the turret now, save the gunner. All the pieces are just about finished, with one detail or set of details missing. And these are decals. Before I apply any of these, I lay down a section of gloss varnish, namely this old pot of Citadel Ard coat. This gives a smooth base, which improves adhesion. The hull, the turret and the gunner will all get some decals, so they all get the Ard coat touch. I lay out some kitchen towel and soak it with water. Then I carefully cut out the decals and place them on the tissue so they can absorb the water. This allows them to be released from their papery prison and prevents them from getting lost in the ocean of a bowl of water. When the decals are free, I carefully lowered them onto the correct parts of the model and then smooth them in place with my brush. I am fortunate that this original Razorback decal sheet made its way into my collection, again thanks to a kind chap called Andy. It seems a shame to chop it into pieces, but they aren't going to contribute to the demise of heretics on a piece of paper, are they? And here's a shot with all the decals on the Razorback and turret. Microsol is applied to each of them to help them conform to an uneven surface if one exists, such as on the sides of the turret here, or on the shoulder pad of the gunner. A final Ard coat is applied to seal the decals in place. Then I free the gunner from his base and stick him in the turret where he belongs. There, ready to vaporize some word bearers. Off camera, I prepared and painted the dozer blade, giving it a vibrant coat of Evil Sun Scarlet, and highlighting it like I did to the other red sections. Here, I am attaching it to the Razorback. A coat of matte varnish from Colourforge seals everything in, and that's the Razorback done. The epitome of armour from 2nd edition 40k, painted in the vibrant colour scheme of the Ultramarines, all primary colours, gleaming on the battlefield, asking to be shot at. Ridiculous? Absolutely. But surely that is the cornerstone of Warhammer 40 grand. And it joins my other vehicles as part of my Ultramarines armour pool. 2 rhinos, a whirlwind, a predator, a land raider, or raider of land, and also another predator, converted with twin-link las cannon on the sponson. Here's some shots of how I needed to build a new sponson mount, and how I attached the turret. I haven't finished painting this, and I haven't made a video on it, because I already made a predator video a few years ago. The only details you need are that I have painted it in the same way as the Razorback, literally using all the same colours and techniques. The las cannon sponsons are magnetised, and the twin-link las cannon was built from spare las cannons from the Land Raider kit for Horus Heresy. And let me take this opportunity to thank some generous supporters. Of course, Andy for supplying the parts to make the Razorback, as well as these people who have supported me through Ko-fi. Buntyman, Al, Oliver Alban, Mère Blair, Cat Feather, and Perlin. These last 2 are regular donors, so thank you very much, kind sirs. Not much else to say, really. Other than, if you like what I do, then why not check out my Instagram, hit all the buttons here on YouTube, consider supporting me through Ko-fi, or just leave a kind comment for the sake of engagement. Ultramarines are one of my favourite armies, and collecting them rekindled my 2nd edition journey, which resulted in this channel. My collection almost has one of each unit for the Ultramarines, but even if I do have one of each, I'm still going to be collecting them. You can be sure of that. And with that, I better go paint some more minis. Take care, and thanks for watching. Razorback Razorbacks are on the move, 5 Marines on board. Las cannons and plasma guns blast the enemy horde. Razor, 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 razorbacks. Razor, 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 razorbacks. Razor, 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 razorbacks. Razor, 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 razorbacks.